Canberra, the capital of Australia, has grown from an idea to a reality, from a sheep run to a city in a single lifetime.
Within 100 years of white settlement, people were beginning to talk of Australia as one nation. The colonies were to become united as states within a federal system of government. The two great cities of the time, Melbourne and Sydney, were such rivals that any thought of promoting one as the national capital might have automatically driven the other away from federation. It was proposed that a new capital be built, and many sites were considered, including here on the shores of Lake George. If the dreams that were painted in 1903 had been accepted, the national capital might today have looked like this.
Perhaps, fortunately, Lake George was not chosen.
Parliamentarians travelled rough roads through the bush, examining several possible locations for a capital. Established towns were considered, and so were stretches of barely developed bushland. A royal commission nominated Albury. The House of Representatives opted for Tumut, and the Senate chose Bombala. The federal government compromised with a site near Delegate. The New South Wales Parliament was reluctant to surrender that land to the Commonwealth and suggested Canberra instead.
In 1908, the Federal Parliament voted for a site on what had been known as the Limestone Plains, or Canberra.
These plains were first settled by Europeans in the 1820s. As with districts throughout the Australian bush in those pioneering days, the plains attracted absentee landlords, wealthy pastoralists and genuine battlers. Of course, they had long been home to Australia's Aboriginal people, who, here as elsewhere, were to be decimated by the arrival of the white man. Following the choice of the area, an initial survey was carried out by the district surveyor, Charles Scrivener. Scrivener's survey defined the Australian Capital Territory, an area of 2,356 square kilometres, which when brought into existence in January 1911 had a population of 1,714 people and 224,764 sheep.
In the shadow of Parliament House sits this hut. It's all that's left of Scrivener's camp, and it's where the surveyors stored their plans. On the surrounding limestone plains, we can read the story of more than 80 years of endeavour since that time.
This was Canberra when the colourful American-born Minister for Home Affairs, King O'Malley, drove the first peg in 1913. Not everyone shared the vision of the Founding Fathers. Canberra has always had its critics. If the cartoonists were satirical, more than 130 architects from around the world were clearly serious in entering the international competition to design a new capital.
A capital, as Lady Denman, wife of the Governor-General, announced at the laying of the foundation stone in 1913, that was to be called Canberra. Within 2 months of that foundation stone being set, a man named Thomas Weston took up his position as Chief Afforestation Officer and horticulturalist. This landscape had been denuded by ring barking of trees to create grazing land. The work begun by Thomas Weston still continues at the nursery he established.
Weston commenced the nursery around about 1915 at Yarralumla. There had been an earlier nursery at Acton, but he set that up primarily to provide all of the tree and shrub species for Canberra, and it still does that to today. Yes, well, we're in Hague Park at the moment, and Weston planted this round about the early 20s, possibly around 1921, I would think, but he planted it primarily as a screen to the city, and it was virtually the city boundary in those days. So it acted as a windbreak and also as a boundary to the city line.
This nursery, by the way, stands close to one of the original houses in the district that has been much modified to make it a suitable residence for Australia's Governor-General, Yarralumla. It was the Governor-General of the day who was entrusted with the envelopes containing the identities of the competing architects. And it was these three men who were entrusted with the task of choosing a worthy winner. They disagreed. The chairman of the board gave his vote to the plans of a Sydney consortium, which the majority of the board did not rate at all. The majority gave third prize to a design by Professor Agache of Paris. It featured a large airport, a lunatic asylum, a vast cemetery, and made no allowance for the fact that the centre of the city would be on a floodplain. Eliel Saarinen, an architect from Finland, took second prize. The winner, a former associate of Frank Lloyd Wright's from Chicago, was Walter Burley Griffin. The judges were much influenced by the beautiful painted cross-sections of the architect's plans, which were executed by his wife, also an architect, Marion Marnie Griffin. Marion Marnie would outlive her husband by a quarter of a century and die in her 90s without much good to say about Australia, which had, she believed, treated Burley Griffin poorly. The rather familiar story of a man with a vision seeming to lose his fight with the bureaucrats. The competition had asked for designs for a city of 25,000 people, with possibilities for further growth. Burley Griffin designed a city for 75,000. In his thinking, he'd been influenced by the designs for Washington, which were themselves suggested by the classicism of Versailles. The bureaucracy responded by adapting the winning design, stating that Canberra will never have a population greater than 10,000. The population now exceeds 300,000. Living in a city that, despite the passage of time, still has at its heart the essence of the Burley Griffin plan. Roads on one axis bisecting the ornamental lake on the other. Since the lake, named after the architect, was not built until 27 years after Burley Griffin's death, the major national and civic buildings that were planned for its banks were long delayed, and even Parliament was given a temporary home, which was officially opened by the Duke of York with great ceremony in 1927. 61 years later, amidst, as we shall see, similar pageantry, the permanent Parliament House was opened by his daughter, Queen Elizabeth II. One of Canberra's landmarks which does trace its origins back to the city's very beginnings is the Royal Military College Duntroon, from which many of these parading soldiers graduated. Duntroon continues to train officers for the Australian Army and for the defence forces of other countries in the region. Back in 1927, it was one of the city's few functioning institutions. Beyond the Duke of York, singing the national anthem, stood Dame Nellie Melba. Beyond the Provisional Parliament House stood very little, although with the transfer of Parliament from Melbourne to Canberra came the transfer of 5,000 people, public servants and their dependents. The city now had a population. This house on Mugger Way, one of Canberra's most prestigious streets, was built in 1927, the same year that Parliament opened.
Welcome to Calthorpe's house. This is a very special sort of house museum. Virtually everything in it was purchased in one big shopping spree in 1927, and most of those things remain in the house today. And when the Calthorpes furnished the house, they bought the things that they really liked. The house represented their dream house, and the things have stayed the same. We're just coming out of the servery and into the kitchen, and over in the corner is an object that some people might be a bit unfamiliar with. It's a 1934 electric early cooker, lovely pun on the name, and this was hired from the government at the time and was never regarded as anything but a kitchen gadget. It wasn't the proper cooker. But over here is the real treasure. This is the original wood stove that's in perfect working order, and we still continue to use it. This bathroom represents the height of fashion for 1927, utterly typical of its time. The black and white surfaces, the emphasis on cleanliness, and the ability to be able to clean things with new products, with new electric servants. This was an all-electric house, quite unusual, and that's one of the attractions of Canberra for the public servants that were removed from Melbourne. Harry Calthorpe was a stock and station agent and involved in some of the sale of the early plots of land in Canberra. And the move here was a deliberate one. The Calthorpe family thought that Canberra was going to be the place to live, exciting, new, and with all of life ahead of them.
Over the succeeding years, new buildings rose. Many government offices, homes and hostels for public servants, schools for their children and shops for their needs. Suburbs started to appear. But for the majority of people, Canberra remained a government posting rather than a home. Parliament assembled here, but politicians did not live in the city.
In 1942, there was a very real fear that Australia would be invaded by the Japanese. This suburban air raid shelter was built in that time, but fortunately, it was never needed. But after the Second World War, Australia changed, and so did Canberra. Diplomatic representation in Australia grew, and with it the building of embassies that reflected the architecture of the countries they represented. And then people came, as migration was encouraged from a greater number of European countries. Initially, few migrants chose Canberra as their first destination. But after the war, particularly with the development of the Snowy Mountains scheme, more and more people came to work and live in the national capital. By the 1950s, as these scenes from home movies of the time show, Canberra was less a posting and more a home. A growing city of families, of gardens and of outdoor recreation. Into the early 60s, there was still only one place to be seen in Canberra, the Monero shopping mall on a Friday evening. Though in those days, young people standing in small groups talking might be asked to move on, because they were young people standing in small groups talking.
Come along, people, listen to me. Don't try to find a home down in Canberra, ECT, Lord, it's a bourgeois town. Well, it's a bourgeois town. Got the bourgeois blues gonna spread the news all around.
ABC political journalist Paul Lynham was in a rock band at that time. So whatever happened to the Bitter Lemons?
They played at a lot of gigs around Canberra and the district. We're the sort of house band at the Lemon Tree and Civic on Friday nights, which in its day was quite a gathering place, much to the irritation of the federal police. In the 60s in Canberra, there was a feeling that everyone was a prisoner of war to some extent. Don't forget, those were very tumultuous times, not just in Australia but around the world. Even people living in Sydney, I think, thought that Australia was a bit of a conservative backwater, and if that was so, what was Canberra?
But the voices of young people were starting to be heard more eloquently in Canberra with the growth of the Australian National University.
I think that happiness for the average Canberra couple would be a housing commission box, a car, an oil heater and a warm bed.
The radical student tradition hasn't been established in Canberra very long, and people tend to think of us as very red, communist ratbags.
I was in the public service for 1 year, and I think it's a lesson a lot of people should take. Join the public service and see how the other half doesn't live.
And the suburbs were starting to grow. Grow rather than sprawl, within a design that was the responsibility of the National Capital Development Commission. The satellite towns, separated from the city centre by corridors of bushland, were to become self-sufficient, with shopping and entertainment facilities and the opportunity for people to live, work and have their recreation within the new towns. The delay in damming the Molonglo River to create Lake Burley-Griffin was a major obstacle to the implementation of the plan for the great buildings that characterise a capital city's administrative and cultural functions. In 1964, the Prime Minister, Sir Robert Menzies, officially declared the lake open.
I declare this lake duly inaugurated. This is not just a matter of pride for us. This is a matter of national importance, because more and more, as people understand that this is the capital of the nation, a capital of which they may be proud, then more and more will they begin to realize instinctively that the nation is more important than any part of it. And so, as I think I said at the beginning, I have a great feeling of official privilege and a great feeling of personal delight, unfeigned personal delight, in declaring this lake to have been inaugurated by me a quarter of an hour ago.
In the years since then, the lake has become increasingly popular as a recreational facility for both residents and visitors. And slowly but surely, its foreshores have been carefully adorned with buildings of great national significance. Perhaps of greater significance to people who live here and call themselves Canberrans has been the arrival of the less formal trappings of a true city, local radio and television stations. And for Australia, a further endorsement of city status, big-time sports teams playing in national competitions and winning in games like basketball, baseball and, above all, rugby league. Canberra maintains a significant place in the sporting life of the country as the home of the Australian Institute of Sport, a state-of-the-art training facility in which the best the country has in many different sporting disciplines are brought together in their pursuit of excellence. One major public building that took a long time to appear was a permanent Parliament House. It was decided to build such a place in time for the bicentenary of white settlement in Australia, and as with the city itself, an international competition was announced. New York architects Mitchell, Jurgler and Thorpe won the prize, and Queen Elizabeth, following in her father's footsteps of more than 60 years before, officially opened the new building.
It is fitting, therefore, and a great pleasure for me to offer my best wishes to all those who will be giving their service to the nation within these walls, and to declare open the new Parliament House of the Commonwealth of Australia.
The drawing boards of the national capital planners still show many schemes that are yet to be realised. some for yet more buildings of national significance, others simply to accommodate the continuing expansion of what has become Australia's fastest growing and, in terms of average age, youngest city. At the end of the 20th century, many people who live in Canberra were actually born and educated here. They are Canberrans.